Hello, everyone. Welcome to Diego Knows. This is Diego, and today I'm going to talk about the new movie Being the Ricardos, which came out last week. I finally got a chance to see it. It is the true story about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and about a week in their life while they were filming I Love Lucy, which at the time was the highest rated show on television. They had about 60 million viewers uh, during that week that this takes place. So it was a pretty big deal. Okay. So to start off with, first of all, my experience with I Love Lucy. When I think of I Love Lucy, I think about being a little boy, maybe 4 years old, 5 years old, and in Chicago at my grandma's house. And in her basement, that's where her bedroom was, in the basement of her building. And my grandma was a big woman, big fat woman, but I loved her to death. And she would lay down on her stomach, and she would look up and watch the TV, which is a black and white TV. And she would watch her Spanish shows and stuff. But late at night, like around 10 o'clock, she would watch the oldie shows. Okay, and that was my introduction to Benny Hill and the Three Stooges and the Little Rascals, and the Honeymooners and I Love Lucy. Okay, this was in Chicago. So me, my brother, my cousin, we were all around the same age. We all would sit there, and we would take turns sitting on Grandma's back. You know, like I said, she was a big woman, and we were little kids, and we would watch I Love Lucy. Now, one of the earliest memories that I have about that is I don't think I could read yet, and the regular talking, I didn't really understand what the adult stuff was going on, but the comedy I got. Okay, it was a laugh track, so I always laughed at the correct times. Okay, like Lucille Ball was funny. I mean, she was legitimately funny. And I'm going to say this right now before we go any further. Um, in my opinion, Lucille Ball is, and always has been, and always will be, the funniest woman that ever lived. She was a comedic genius. There's people that were born to do things. William Shakespeare was born to write stories. Steven Spielberg was born to direct movies. There's prodigies out there that were put here for a reason, because they're so good at what they do, and Lucille Ball is one of them. She's the greatest female entertainer that ever lived, hands down. Now, I'm going to say female entertainer because I think there's only one person that was funnier than her, and that would have to be Bob Hope. Bob Hope is probably the only one that could match her, and he knew her. They were friends, actually. I think Bob Hope's probably the only comedian in the world that could match her for her timing, for her body humor, and for the one-liners. But definitely, yeah, she was up there. She was either the second greatest comedian that ever lived, or the first. Opinions vary. It's just my opinion. I think the only one who was better than her was Bob Hope, and then her. And I'm putting her up against my favorite comedians. Okay, Bob Hope's not my favorite comedian. Okay, my favorite comedian is like Rodney Dangerfield. Okay, but there's some greats out there. Eddie Murphy's an incredible. Eddie Murphy's a god when it comes to comedy. You know, but yeah, but I would still put I would still put Lucille Ball above Eddie Murphy. I mean, her jokes today. If you watch I Love Lucy today, I guarantee you'll laugh. That's how funny the show is. I mean, that show came out 70 years ago, all right, and it's still funny today. That's a testament of how good that show was, how great her performance was. She didn't do it alone, but she was definitely the driving force behind that show, behind I Love Lucy. And this movie really, really explains that. Explains how I Love Lucy was a combined effort. It wasn't just one person, but she was definitely the one in front. She was definitely the one that carried the show. Without Lucy, there was no show. She was the one in front. She had a lot of help, but ultimately it was her ass on the line. It was her ass that was up for everybody to see. you know so and this movie really did a good job with that. So the movie is about this one week in 1952, during the first season of I Love Lucy, where Lucy gets accused of being a communist. Now, I am a huge I Love Lucy fan. Obviously, I've got the whole thing. I've seen every episode. uh, when I started watching I Love Lucy as a little boy, I remember, as I got older, Lucy did some other stuff too. She did I remember she was older and she did the Color Lucy show, like the Lucy show and Here's Lucy, and then she did that god awful sitcom in the 80s. I actually watched it, Life with Lucy. It was terrible. But, they weren't as funny. I didn't like those shows. The ones with Gail Gordon, that fussy white guy with the balding head and the mustache, he would always be like the straight guy and Lucy would be the crazy one. I didn't really like those shows. I didn't really watch those. They were boring to me. Lucy was there obviously, but she was older and I was an old lady doing jokes, and I just didn't appeal to me. But I Love Lucy. Oh my gosh, I could watch that forever. That thing was just so goddamn funny. I mean, even today it was funny. So I Love Lucy was definitely my favorite Lucy show, and I remember watching this stuff and just thinking about my grandma, thinking about being a little boy. And then as I got older, I still watched this show, and it was funny. It was funny as hell. Still is today. I remember probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, I saw a documentary on Lucy. And I was so interested because I hadn't watched the episodes in a while. And I was so interested in her that I started doing some research on Lucy. I saw a couple of movies. There was a made-for-TV movie in 1991 with Frances Fisher was in it. And the guy that played Sonny on General Hospital, he played Desi Arnaz, where she played Lucy. It was called like Life Before Lucy or something. And it was pretty good. And then they did another one in 2003. They made a movie about Lucy with the Latino guy from Law and Order, I think, played Desi in that one, and then some woman I never heard about played Lucy, but that was pretty good too. Wasn't great, but it was pretty good. So I was expecting this movie to be, better than that, and unfortunately it wasn't. But I'll get to that. So the point is that probably around the late '90s, early 2000s, I remember I went to the library, the Chicago Public Library, and I checked out a book on Lucy, an audiobook on Lucy's biography. And it was like one of those 22-hour audiobooks. So it took me, a couple of weeks to finish listening to it all, but I learned a lot about her. I learned a lot. Like she went to acting school with Betty Davis. And Betty Davis told her she was a piece of shit, and she got kicked out of acting school. That she registered as a communist because her grandfather kind of talked her into it. And she said back then in the 30s, it was better to be a communist than it was to be a Republican. So just stuff like that. I learned a lot about her. And so I already knew a lot. So if you're going to hit me with a movie about Lucy, you better get your facts right, because I know a lot about Lucy. So he was like, you better have your facts right. And I knew about Desi Arnaz. In fact, right now, I'm in the middle of listening to Desi Arnaz's autobiography. It's called A Book by Desi Arnaz. I'm like in the middle of it right now. So I'm getting a lot of it from his point of view right now, but I'm not done with that yet. But I've learned a lot about him. So, okay, so now that I give you that background about the movie itself, okay, well, first of all, it's an okay movie. I saw some of the reviews that other YouTubers have done about the movie, and some of them said it was really good, like the diehard fans said it's really good, and then some of the other people going, like, it's really crap. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's not great, but it's not terrible, but it's not great. It's mediocre. It's a mediocre movie. Okay, and I know this guy Aaron Sorkin is supposed to be like a god in Hollywood. Like everyone wants to work for him. Everyone wants to work for his movies because I guess he wrote A Few Good Men. He wrote The Chicago 7. This is his third movie directing, but he's written a lot of famous movies like Molly that came out a couple years ago. He wrote that. So he wrote a lot of stuff. He's well known in Hollywood, and so a lot of actors want to work with him because he's a good name. You know, he's an independent filmmaker and stuff. Known for more for his screenplays. Like I said, this is only his third movie he's ever directed. But his dialogue, he's famous for that. So people want to work for him. And I got to tell you, I wasn't really impressed. I think the movie kind of wavers on being a little too pretentious. And what I mean by that is that it's trying to tell you how good it is instead of showing you how good it is. Okay. All right. So to start off with, like I said, I know a lot about Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. In the movie, first of all, let's start off with Nicole Kidman. She resembles Lucille Ball, but there's too many differences and that I can't look away from. And there's some scenes where she does a really good Lucille Ball impersonation. She really does. She's got the voice down, the craggly voice that Lucy had. I saw some of Lucy's older movies, where she didn't have that voice in her younger movies, okay? But on the show, she had it because all the cigarettes that she'd been smoking, her voice started getting more cracky, more graggly. And then by the time she was an old lady, she was like, I'm Lucy Ball, she talked like that. But she didn't always talk that way. She actually had a soft voice when she was younger. So in I Love Lucy was like in between that. So her voice was starting to get craggly. And Nicole Kidman did a really good job with that. So kudos for that. However, I'm just going to say it right now, okay, just to be honest. Okay, Nicole Kidman is a beautiful woman, but she is past her prime. Okay, she's playing Lucille Ball. Okay, she looks like Lucille Ball if Lucille Ball got Botox. Okay, if Lucille Ball had a facelift, she would look like Nicole Kidman. Okay, but obviously Lucille Ball did not have a facelift. She did not have Botox. So we're seeing a woman, Nicole Kidman, who's 54 years old, but pretending to be 34 years old, playing a woman who's 42 years old, who's pretending to be 32 years old. Okay. I can't get past it. Yes, you can do her hair, you can do the voice. Nicole Kidman is slimmer than Lucille Ball was at that time, so you got that right there. Her figure's better than Lucille Ball's figure was at that time. So it was hard for me to buy her as Lucy. What I saw was a woman doing an impersonation of Lucy, but I didn't buy her as Lucy. Okay, and the biggest part besides the Botox, was just obvious. You know, it's like, you ever seen a movie? Like, I remember a movie I saw called Amityville Horror, the one that came out in 2005. The one with Ryan Reynolds. Okay, well, then the original Amityville Horror took place in the 70s. Okay, the book took place in the 70s. The Amityville Horror took place in the early 70s. Okay, but in the 2005 version, the wife is obviously got a boob. I mean, she's got fake tits. Okay, they're fake. Okay, she got it from a doctor. Okay, they didn't have fake tits in the early 70s. Okay. So it's like, there's no way in hell you're going to make me believe that this movie's taking place in the early 70s. Okay, they didn't have fake tits in the early 70s. Okay, so that already takes me out of the movie right then and there. You know, that's how I felt watching this. Okay, Nicole Kidman obviously has had her cheeks stretched back. She's had her eyes done, and she's got Botox on her face. You know, she looks like Megan Fox. And I was like, no, I can, you're not, like, I can see what they didn't have that in 1951. Okay, they didn't have that. So obviously this movie was filmed in 2021. Okay, so that kind of took me out of it. All right. And another thing, the big problem that I've had with this movie, with Aaron Sorkin's directing, okay, is this is an Oscar bait movie. Okay, which means that these actors are trying really hard to get nominated for an Oscar. Okay, or this is the time of year when those Oscar movies come out: September, November, October. You know, all these movies. They're lower budget. They're independent filmmakers normally, and they're trying to win Oscars. That's when all the Oscar movies come out. The blockbusters come out in the summer, but the Oscar contenders always come out in the fall. All right, and this is one of those movies. They're trying to win an Oscar because everybody wants to get that Oscar so they can get more movies. You know, they can get more work. And of course, that's why all the oh yeah, Nicole Kidman's going to be nominated. Of course she is. She's not. She's not going to get nominated. All right, she did a good job, but you can't get past the aesthetic. All right, so what Aaron Sorkin is doing here with the actors, okay, with the main characters, and what I mean by that is I'm talking about Nicole Kidman, Javier Bardem, the guy that plays William Frawley, and the woman that plays Vivian Vance. All right, I forgot their names for some reason. J.K. Simmons plays William Frawley. I forgot the actress that plays Vivian Vance. But what they do here, what they're trying to do, is Aaron Sorkin is like, okay, I'm going to set up the performance first. So he gives you a couple of seconds to get ready. Okay, it's like a countdown. And then Aaron Sorkin's like, okay, now go, boom. And then Nicole Kidman starts going into her dramatic Lucille Ball speech, you know? And he does it again with Javier Bardem. He's like setting up. Okay, he's like, okay, you're Desi Arnaz, ready? Okay, now 1, 2, 3. Now act like Desi, go. And he's like, well, you know, I let that, you know, and that's when the big drum. So he's setting it up. So it's so freaking obvious what's going on here. It's so freaking obvious is that they're trying to prepare the audience, or I guess the Academy, because the Academy's gonna watch the movie, for their performance. Like, get ready for it, here it comes, ready, boom, 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 you know. And it's so pretentious because I can see what you're doing. You're not trying to tell a story about Lucy and Desi. You're trying to win Academy Awards. You know, it's like this movie is a vehicle to win your Academy Award. It's not a movie. You see what I mean? It's like, okay, we got to film something, but we're trying to win an Academy Award. You know, it's so pretentious, and I see right through that. You know, I mean, I'll tell you right now, the best actor in this movie is not going to get nominated for shit. Okay, I looked him up. His name is Tony Hale. Think of that name, Tony Hale. He plays a real life person named Jess Oppenheimer. Jess Oppenheimer was the showrunner and the executive producer of I Love Lucy. And he plays that character. A very important character to the show I Love Lucy in real life. Okay, this guy was so perfect as a TV producer that he's invisible. You don't even notice he's acting. I didn't even see the actor. I saw a TV producer arguing with Nicole Kidman pretending to be Lucille Ball. I saw a TV producer talking to Javier Bardem pretending to be Desi Arnaz. Okay, I didn't see Tony Hale. I saw a TV producer. This guy acted like a TV producer. He spoke like a TV producer. He had the body language of a TV producer. Okay, the things that he talked about were things that a TV producer would talk about. No words were wasted. This guy was incredible. He was so incredible. The fact that he was so invisible in the role is what made me notice him. Okay? I think Aaron Sorkin, the director, forgot that he cast this guy in the movie because he didn't set him up at all. He was not set up to do a performance. He didn't go 1, 2, 3, now go, now be a TV producer. No, he just played it straight out. The camera was on him. He said his lines. He acted the part. He gave his arguments. He said what he had to say, and then he went out. Boom, like that. There was no setup for his performance. There was no countdown, invisible countdown for him to, do a scene. Okay, like they did with Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem. It was pathetic what they did there. This guy was so incredible. He stood out because Aaron Sorkin made sure he didn't stand out. But he did stand out. He stand out because he was such a believable character. I couldn't believe it. This guy was incredible. I was looking at him. I was like, okay, Javier Bardem, Nicole Kidman, this guy is good. This guy is good. He's not trying to steal any scenes. He's not trying to get all the limelight on him. He's not even trying to take over the camera. He's just saying his lines. He's just playing it like a TV producer. I was like, oh my God, I believe he's a TV producer. I don't even see an actor. Unbelievable. And for a minor character to pull that off, if anyone should win an award, it should be him. Tony Hale. This guy was awesome. This is awesome. I mean, this guy was just incredible. And he's not even nowhere near he's probably like maybe the 6th in the credits. But he had a lot of screen time and he delivered, And he didn't even have any major dramatic lines. He was just playing a normal TV producer, reacting to normal things. He didn't have the overly dramatic speeches like Desi Arnaz or like Lucille Ball would have, or William Frawley or Vivian Vance. He was just like a TV producer trying to run a show. Unbelievable how good that was. So there's that. Javier Bardem, no. I know he's a good actor. I've seen him in other things. He's got one of those faces that can convey a lot of emotion. But he's no Desi Arnaz. He doesn't look like Desi Arnaz. Okay, Desi Arnaz has very soft features, very smooth, soft features. And Javier Bardem looks like he's been punched in the face about 600 times. Like he's just not he's an ugly guy. He looks like a boxer. If they ever make a movie about Anthony Quinn, okay, the famous actor Anthony, if they ever make a movie about Anthony Quinn, you better get Javier Bardem to play him, because there's no one else on earth who can play Anthony Quinn. Javier Bardem is Anthony Quinn. Okay, he's just our generation's Anthony Quinn, all right? He looks like Anthony Quinn. He sounds like Anthony Quinn. This guy looked like Anthony Quinn playing Desi Arnaz. He looks nothing like fucking Desi Arnaz. Nothing like Desi Arnaz. They hired him because he's a name. And that's it. Okay? He's got some of the charm, but he does not have the voice. Everybody who's seen I Love Lucy knows exactly what Desi Arnaz sounds like. This guy does not sound like Desi Arnaz. Not even close. Other than the accent, and he doesn't even get that right. Okay? He's got a Spanish Latino accent. He does not have a Cuban Latino accent. All right? So he doesn't even get that right. And when I was, I'm Mexican. Like, I speak Spanish. Okay, so when I watched I Love Lucy as a little boy, okay, when Ricky Ricardo would go into Spanish, I understood everything he's saying. I still do, okay? I knew exactly what he was saying. Okay, I understood the Spanish. I didn't need any subtitles. I totally understood what he was saying. Okay, and this guy just didn't pull that off for me. Okay, there's a scene where they show when Desi Arnaz first meets Lucy. It's in 1940. They were working on a movie called Too Many Girls. I've seen the movie. I own the movie. And the thing about it is that in 1951 or 1952, when this movie is taking place, when Being the Ricardos takes place in 1952, Desi Arnaz was in his, he was like in his late 30s, and he was a little bit heavier, like he had kind of the double chin, he had kind of kind of like the dad bod, gut. And same thing with Lucy. She was 42 at the time, and she was a little heavier than she was when she was younger. But if you ever watch Too Many Girls, that's the movie where they first met each other. Lucy was slim. She was skinny. She actually looked like Nicole Kidman does in the movie. She was slim. and so was Desi Arnaz. And this guy was skinny. Okay, I mean, he looked athletic. Don't get me wrong. He didn't look like a concentration camp survivor, but he was slim. He was playing a football player. He looked in shape. Okay, he was lean. He was dark. He had the long, like the wavy hair. He had that Cuban accent. That smile. I can understand why women fell for him. I mean, this guy was just a charmer. And this guy was just like, he was this slim, good-looking guy with a great smile. Hello, Dad. And when he's playing the bongas, I mean, this guy was awesome. He was the bomb. You know, and I'm sorry, but Javier Bardem in this movie looks closer to Desi in 1952, not Desi in 1940. Okay, Desi in 1940 was skinny. Desi Arnaz in 1952 was not skinny. Okay, Javier Bardem is playing Desi in 1952, but he also plays Desi in 1940. And there's no fucking way in hell you're going to convince me that the scenes where he's a young Desi Arnaz, that's a 23-year-old Desi Arnaz. It's not. Okay, that's like a 50-year-old Desi Arnaz pretending to be a 23-year-old Desi Arnaz. He's not even skinny. So I'm just like, come on. Like, if there's no way in hell you're going to make me believe that 50-year-old Javier Bardem is a 23-year-old Desi Arnaz. He's still got the gut. He looks the same as he looks the same as he does as an older man. It's like, come on, man. He's got the wrinkles. Come on. Dude, you're not going to convince me this guy's 23 years old. He's a 23-year-old skinny Desi Arnaz. He's not. Watch that movie, Too Many Girls. Watch that movie and look at Desi Arnaz in that movie. Okay, he looks completely different than what he does on I Love Lucy. Okay, look at Lucille Ball. Not only does she look different, she sounds different. That's what I talked about. Like, her voice didn't get craggy until she started smoking all those cigarettes. But back then, she was like in her late 20s. Her voice hadn't changed yet. So even she sounded and looked different back then. Okay, and then look at I Love Lucy. There's a big difference between those two, and unfortunately, because this is a movie about them, there was no difference. Okay, they look the exact same in 1940 as they do in 1952. I call bullshit on that. Just bad. That was a bad choice. If you cannot cast younger actors to play these roles, then just don't put the scene in the movie. It's not needed. We don't need to see how they first met. It has nothing to do with the plot of the story. As long as they mention it, it's all we need to know. So that was bad filmmaking, in my opinion, right there. So yeah, Javier Bardem. I know he's a name, so that's why they cast him. But I'm sure they could have found a better actor out there to do it. Nothing against him. I'm sorry, Desi Arnaz just doesn't look like. I mean, Javier Bardem just doesn't look like Desi Arnaz. He just doesn't. Has the same problem with who's the guy? Who's the screwball that plays James Bond right now? Daniel Craig. To me, James Bond is Sean Connery. It's Roger Moore. I mean, these guys look like James Bond. They got the chiseled features. Pierce Bronson. They got the chiseled features. Timothy Dalton. These guys are very handsome men. They look like James Bond. Daniel Craig is about as good looking as my asshole. Okay? He looks like he's been punched in the face 600 times. All right? He does not. He's got the fucking ears that stick out and he fucking cries all the time. His face looks ugly as fuck. I can't see him as James Bond. I don't believe that he's James Bond. James Bond doesn't fucking cry about women. This is, I don't know what the fuck this is. But I never bought him as James Bond. For all you James Bond. And that's the same problem I have with Javier Bardem as Desi Arnaz. I don't buy him as Desi Arnaz. I know he's trying. He's got the clothes, he's got the haircut, he's got the tan, but that's all he's got. That's not Desi Arnaz. I'll take Desi Arnaz over Javier Bardem any day of the week. No offense to him, but he just didn't sell it to me, Like I said, the best actor there was Tony Hale, the one that played Jess Oppenheimer. Couldn't believe how good he was. It was so seamless that it blew me away. So there's that going on here. The show that they're working on was just like a throwaway episode of I Love Lucy, but the biggest point of all was that she was being investigated as a communist, and back then that was a big deal. Now, I don't want to get political, but I can't help it. It's 2021. All Hollywood movies are political, okay? And I'll let you guess which side they're on, all right? But they talk about communism in this movie, and Lucy goes on this rant. Not a rant maybe, but she goes on this speech about how her grandfather, Fred, was for the working man, for the proletariat, and he believed in workers' rights. and he believed that workers should be paid fairly, and that there should be no property, and that everyone should be equal, and blah blah blah. And I was kind of, and basically the Communist Manifesto. All right, and she goes on this big tirade about how these were good things. In 2021, this is a movie that comes out in 2021, right? You kind of see where they're going with this, and Javier Bardem as Desi Arnaz is like, what the part they didn't tell you about communism is how they lock up your father in jail for being the mayor of Santiago, and how I had to flee to America to get away from them, and then they changed the subject. So if there was a scene that was pro-communism, then Nicole Kidman's Lucille Ball definitely gave you that speech. And they're talking about the Red Scare. They're talking about the communist witch hunts of the 1950s, which was a very real thing. I don't think the filmmakers can see the irony, We've got this thing nowadays called cancel culture, where if you get caught voting for the wrong candidate, or you get caught, saying something offensive from like 12, 15 years ago, your life is ruined, We live in that culture today, which is what they were living in back then, but on the other side of it. And, I'll give it to the liberals, they know how to erase something by doing it. So yeah, I couldn't help but not notice that, so I had to put it in there. The beginning of the movie is a little confusing because you've got these old people that they're interviewing. Like the movie starts off as if someone's making a documentary about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and they're interviewing these old people. And I recognize the actors that were playing the old people. That was Ronnie Cox from RoboCop. Remember him? And the woman, the old lady that was playing one of Lucille Ball's writers, Michelle Pugh, I recognized her. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So they're interviewing this woman. It's 2021. So that means that they interviewed her in 2020. And she wrote for the show in 1951. Okay, so 70 years ago. So if she had been in her 20s, then this woman they're interviewing would be like 95, 99 years old. Like, I don't think so. And that's when I realized that they were using actors. These are actors playing these like old writers and producers for the show. And I recognized one of them. I was like, oh, that's Alice. That's Linda Lavin. She's playing Michelle Pugh. That's Linda Lavin. That's Alice. You remember that show Alice from the 70s? It used to be sad, used to be shy. Funniest thing and saddest part is I never knew why. Remember Alice? Remember she worked at the diner, Mel's Diner? Remember with Polly Holiday and Vera, and of course one of my favorite TV actors of all time, Vic Tayback. Okay, remember he was Mel. Remember he was flipping the burgers back then. Mel, he had that chili that he made in Alice. Yeah, I recognize Alice. Alice is in this movie. I was like, damn, I haven't seen her in a while. That's Alice from the TV show Alice. I used to watch that show as a kid. Like, that show was on for like 10 years. Remember Flo, Kiss My Grits? Yeah, anyway. So that was in there, so I thought that was kind of cool. Otherwise, I've always been fascinated with the I Love Lucy universe. I mean, that was some groundbreaking television. It really was. I mean, even today, the stuff makes me laugh. When I think about all the hard work that they put into that show, a lot of people don't realize just how much of a cultural impact that show had. This was the first interracial relationship ever in the media in America, ever. This was the first one, okay? The idea today is like, it's stupid, but back then, a Cuban and a white woman married? And they got a kid? That was pretty bad. A lot of people, other networks probably wouldn't have aired it. That's the kind of clout that Lucy had. She had the #1 show in America. So she had the clout to insist that, hey, my husband's Cuban, this is what he is, and we're going to do the show or I ain't doing the show. So, they bent over for her, like, okay, because she could bring the attention, she could bring the sponsors. Philip Morris cigarette company, that's why they're all smoking on the show. Did you ever notice that? Lucy and Ricky are all smoking cigarettes on the show. Philip Morris, of course, they paid for the whole show. They paid for everything, so of course they're going to smoke. You know, um, the impact the show had on just, I mean, they invented basically this. I mean, sitcoms that existed before that, but they perfected it. They're the first ones to use 3 cameras. So you didn't have to shoot it from one scene, from one angle all the time. They had 3 different shots, and they edited it later and then sent it. This was the first sitcom that was filmed on 35 millimeter film. They didn't do that before. You know, this was the first sitcom ever that had an ensemble cast. The same cast members every episode playing the same characters. They never had that before. And then Ricky, Desi Arnaz was Cuban and he's speaking Spanish on the show. Who the fuck spoke Spanish in America? That was like that was only like Mexicans spoke that. It's and that was funny. I'm Latino. This guy put us on the map when it comes to Hollywood. This is the guy that put us on the map. If there was no Desi Arnaz, there wouldn't be any Latinos in Hollywood. He was the first one. And he practically invented the sitcom by himself. I mean, that's Desi Arnaz, man. That's how important this guy was. Why do you think I'm reading a book about him right now? This guy was incredible. This guy was a genius. Now everyone's got their faults, but I mean, Desi Arnaz was a genius. He contributed so much to the show. A lot of people don't realize that. He's the one that brokered the deal with CBS. He's the one that bought the Desilu Studios. He was the one that greenlit every show that came through there. If it wasn't for Desi Arnaz, there would be no Mission Impossible, no Star Trek, no Twilight Zone. Just think about that for a minute. No Untouchables. Just think about that. None of those shows would have existed if it hadn't been for Desi Arnaz. And those shows are still relevant today. I mean, he basically ran that studio and he was a star of the show. I mean, Lucy too. Lucy did the same thing. She approved everything on that show. And she was the front runner. The show was about her. She was a star. If the show fails, she failed. She was the face. They're going to blame her before they blame Desi Arnaz because she was the face of the show. So she had to carry all the burden, all the responsibility of that show. These are tough things for 2 people to do. You've got companies that all share this responsibility and they can't even handle it. Here you only had 2 people. That's a pretty tall order. It's very hard to do that. So yeah, kudos to them, man. I mean, they really put the sitcom on the map, and they did a great job. They perfected it, and everyone else is just trying to keep up. Personally, there's stuff, I know all about Desi Arnaz infidelities, but a lot of people don't know that Lucille Ball cheated on Desi too. Okay, you don't hear too much about that, but they did. I mean, they were cheating on both sides here, and Desi did have a drinking problem, But something I want to say, another thing about the show that I haven't mentioned yet is one thing I don't like about Aaron Sorkin's directing this show. I'm going to end it with this: is that he treated them all like they were assholes. Okay, none of the characters came across as good, honestly. Nicole Kidman's portrayal of Lucille Ball she was a bitch. She was a bitch to everybody on the set. She was a prima donna. She was bossy as fuck. She had to be told to give credit to her husband when her husband was actually the president of the company, but she would override his authority over and over again. And finally, another character had to tell him, like, hey, you keep cutting off Desi Arnaz's balls in front of the whole crew, And Desi Arnaz, same thing. He's an asshole too. He berates his employees in front of everybody else. He makes threats. Vivian Vance, she's a bitch too. I mean, she's got her good side too, but yeah, she can be a bitch. She's always fucking complaining about this, complaining about that. William Frawley, yeah, he's a drunk. Yeah, he's a nice guy too, but he's a drunk. He's an asshole. He's always berating Vivian Vance. They're always berating each other, so they don't come across as likable. The writers too. The writers are a couple of assholes. You got the guy writer, he's a jerk, and then you got the female writer, she's this ultra feminist bitch. It's like, come on, and they're bitches to each other. Like her and Lucy have it out. Vivian and Lucy have it out. Ricky and Josh and Jess have it out. It's like everyone's fighting with each other. They don't come across as likable at all. And for a show called I Love Lucy, man, you just have this idea that they all liked each other. They all were having a blast on the set every day. Like it wasn't even work. It was fun. And it wasn't. Not according to this. Everyone was an asshole. Desi, Lucy, everybody was an asshole. And this movie makes it like that. I mean, it really puts that across. I mean, Desi's probably the most likable, but then at the end, Lucy just slams him with his infidelity. He's like, "Who's this girl? Who's this lipstick? This is my lipstick. Whose lipstick is it?" He's like, "Oh, well, Lucy." It's like, come on. So everyone comes across as unlikable. Okay, so if you love Lucy, you're not gonna love her after this, right? I mean, you can still love her, but just know that this was not the real Lucille Ball. Okay, and this movie, if there's any credibility to, I know, I mean, some of the facts that were in there were correct. But if there's any credibility to it, then the Arnazes were not a very likable couple. But they did produce an incredible show. They produced one of the greatest TV shows of all time. And like I said before, Lucille Ball, for all of her faults, for all of her shortcomings, she is still the funniest female comedian that ever lived. And I will stand by that to my dying days. She was the funniest woman that ever lived. I even tell that to my son. If anyone ever asked me, I say Lucille Ball was the funniest woman that ever lived. Anyone asked me who was Lucille Ball? Funniest woman that ever lived. And she was.